CBS Media, and I'm going to be joined by some fantastic guests tonight. The Combine is one of those things that everyone says is unimportant until it starts, and then it becomes super important. And even the people who say they don't care about it will suddenly get into hours and hours of arguing about the thing they say they don't care about. And say things like underwear Olympics, blah, blah, blah. I don't care about people running a straight line. But one is clearly you do. And while running in a straight line is not a great way to find great football players in and of itself, fast is better than slow. How do I know that? I was slow, right? That's why I'm sitting here talking to you now. And I did not have a fabulous pro or even college career. I played that much in college and frankly, not much when we were in high school. I had a not even a growth spurt. I had a fill out spurt. I never, grew. 5'7" and 5'8" is as tall as I got. And by the time I got to like my junior year of high school, I had a good high school body. Junior year of college, I had a high school body. I was a late bloomer. My physical peak at about age 24, I probably could have at least seen the field a little bit. I was always about 4 years off from where I needed to be. Very late bloomer. But you're not here to hear about my whining and complaining about my own career. You're here to hear me whine and complain about other people's careers, or really to the point, analyze other people's careers. Now, for a long time, there was this divide between looking at college players and looking at pro players and thinking of them, and saying, this player would be great except, or but, or without this, or here we go. And what happened, hello there, or there, welcome, is people used to believe that you'd have to essentially remake a player practically to, here we go, in order to get them, quote unquote, pro ready, get them into the NFL. And what happened was essentially the NFL decided to become more like college, or at least more like the way that college players were allowed to play. So now we have the NFL is more college-ish in a lot of ways, at least on offense, and to some extent on defense, than it was 20 or 30 years ago. And so the arguments we used to have, some of the arguments we used to have, are null and void, right? Because people still say, but he can't read the whole field. Guess what? That almost never happens. Rarely do you ever say this guy's going to have to read the whole field. You really want someone reading half the field about, 90, well, no, not 90, but 80-ish% of the time. Partially because you don't have the time, right? I think that Mike Martz was sort of the last of his breed to some extent, right? When you would have, and there's Jordan, you would have an offensive coordinator say, okay, you're going to get hit on this play, right? They would say flat out, but it's going to be great because we're going to run this fantastic, we're going to have like a dig underneath, and this guy's going to run a shake right over the top. You're going to be running, play action off 7 steps. You're going to get drilled, but we're going to score a touchdown. And Kurt Warner would be like, okay, right? Because he was Kurt Warner. He was fully on board for that. Because he knew he was living on borrowed time anyway, right? We all know the story. He was like, sure, I get drilled. We score a touchdown. I'll call that a fair trade, right? Fair exchange, no robbery. But people decided after the tragedy that was Andrew Luck that we no longer want a quarterback getting drilled, 14 times on 30 dropbacks. No longer considered a good idea. We would allow our quarterback to, one, not get drilled at all if we can help it, or get drilled fewer times. But getting back to why we're talking about all this, we just had, drum roll please. No, we don't. Screw it to it. Scouting combine. And I've been to it several times. Looking back to the days of the RCA Dome, I'm not quite old enough to have been to the Tampa Quadra ones. Right? I know people who were there. I've talked to scouts who were there, including the late, great C.O. Braccato. If those who didn't get to know him, sorry. I wish you did. That guy had a story about everybody. He had stories about Lawrence Taylor. He had that guy. If there's ever scouts inducted into the Hall of Fame, and there should be, You got to start with C.O. Bricado. Bill Nunn has made it as a contributor, and A.C. Wells, Judge Wells, has got to make it as well. But that's not why you came to hear me blabber. You hear me blab less and then talk more to these people. Derek, please introduce yourself to the people who don't know you yet.
Hey, Bill. Nice to see you again, man.
Great seeing you. Tell people.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, always. Tell people what you're up to.
Something similar to you. I mean, focusing on the draft, as much film as I can get through is
yes, sir.
A one-man gang, but I actually been blessed here in the last probably 3 or 4 days to have 4 or 5 people kind of join in and want to help. So creating a website for the draft is what we're doing, and it's very as you know yourself, it's very labor intensive, and it's an uphill grind with exponential level of difficulty each preceding day.
And it's probably foolish, but we'll get more into that later.
It is. It is. I remember. But I'm Irish and Scottish, so.
Oh, well, you can stop right there. You can stop
we don't back off.
You can stop right there. So, as you may have noticed, my last name is Carroll, and I am probably not, genetically related, but related by way of, I don't know, sweat equity to the first family of Maryland, however you want to word that. One of my distant ancestors was a wedding present to the 3rd son of the first governor of the state of Maryland. There's a Carroll County named for that family, and I am distantly associated through, labor, management labor connection. We'll talk more later. That's a whole other show. But also, we're joined by Jordan, also known as Draft Jesus, the man who is the guardian of the holy spreadsheet. Oh, Coach, have you been exposed to Jordan's spreadsheet?
I think we met before on another show, maybe, Jordan. But as far as the spreadsheet goes, no. We probably have a foot in the same boat because everything I do is like Google Sheets.
Yep. And I mean, I'm sure we've interacted even if we haven't been on the show. Most of draft community is close together, even though they're far apart on their takes, right? So it's like the whole aspect of it is, I keep the spreadsheet, basically keeping all of the combine results all in one spot so people can follow it live. That's between all the testing numbers, so the 40s, the 10s, the measurements, all as they come in live. I'm still looking for a few more wingspans, so it'll be fully finished once that's done. I actually just put in the offensive line bench presses this morning. We got a few more numbers to put in there, but outside of that, we're fully complete with it. And it's literally my baby. I love it to death. I love the combine. I've been following it forever. And I'm just glad to get a free resource to people where they could get interested in the draft.
Yeah. That's cool, man.
It is super cool.
My second monitor right now has 3 Google Sheets open, 3 different tabs. So,
that's how I feel.
We've come to the right place then.
Yeah, come to the right place. Yes. Your obsession here is simply part of the background. I'm
literally sitting there we were doing a 6-hour live stream, me and Matt of Draft Nerds, for those who don't know. And I'm sitting there on my phone. I text him, look, I'm sorry. I know it looks like I'm on my phone all the time, but it's because I'm typing everything in, because I know if I don't, I'm going to get messaged 400 times. I've learned my lesson about making sure the long snappers measurements are in the spreadsheet. So don't worry, they are there.
Yes.
I know all the people by
Bill Belichick is smiling.
It might have been Bill Belichick Burner DMing me a couple years ago, honestly.
Once over lightly. There's people who believe the combine is useless. The people who believe the combine is central, and of course, the truth is always somewhere in between. If you think the combine doesn't matter, why would they keep having it? Right? I mean, these people. Yes, it's a television event, but they were doing it long before it was ever televised. And I'm old enough to remember when you used to have to know somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody to give you whispers and rumors about what had happened. I remember, getting fourth-hand information about what Bruce Smith had done at the combine and stuff like that, right?
You're telling me there weren't spreadsheets in 1999?
No, I'm talking about. First of all, I'm not talking about 1999. I'm talking about way before that. But yes, there were no spreadsheets. There was no televised coverage. And frankly, there was very little press, right? Paul Zimmerman, aka Dr. Z, for those who don't remember, and like Howard, what was his last name? But there was like a handful of guys who even cared. I mean, it's amazing how much it's changed, right? I've been doing this for over 40 years. And so I remember the first time I wrote about the combine, I wrote about like 11 guys, right? Mm-hmm. And it was all based on like I said, fourth-hand information, rumors, lies, innuendo, because you couldn't get any real information. So when I write about Emmitt Smith running 4.63, that's because I knew somebody who was there timing him. Shout out to like guys like John Westernhaber and some of the other guys I've known who've been around for many, many years and doing this forever. And of course, the late great C.O. Bricado, and of course, Gil Brandt himself, right, who I got a chance to interact with, when he was still with us for about 11 or so years when he got on social media, which I thought, this is awesome. And I got to know Bill Nunn a little bit. In fact, corresponded with him beginning when I was a child. And I used to write NFL teams as a young child back when people wrote letters. And you would usually get back like a form letter saying, hey, keep on being a fan or whatever, it'd be clearly, something they generate, sent out to whoever wrote it. But to his credit, the late, great Bill Nunn wrote me back. It took months, but he wrote me back a handwritten letter mailed to me on Steelers letterhead and gave me his office information. And you would call, and this little old lady who sounded like she was maybe 71 years old would answer. The Steelers for a long time were really like a mom and pop shop. Like they really resisted modernization for a long time. The last time I talked to Bill Nunn was probably about 2016, maybe. And the same 71-year-old, I guess maybe she was 91 by that point, or whatever age she was. As far as I could tell, it was the same lady answering. She said, "Oh no, he's not in, but I'll take a message." And it sounded like she grabbed, like papyrus, and took down my information. And he called me back, and we talked, and he retired again. Not long after that, and I didn't talk to him again. And then obviously, he passed a couple years after that. But getting back to what we're actually talking about, the combine. The combine, as we all know, was originally just to save people having to fly all over the place to get medicals, right? And it was a combination, right? And you had Eagles, Steelers, Blesto. You had Blesto saying, "Hey, this is stupid," and then Quadra. You had competing combines for a little while.
Right. Then was it 2 or 3?
It was at one point. It was up to 3.
Okay. I'm old enough to kind of remember. Yeah.
Right. So there was 2, and then somebody decided 2 isn't enough. It went up to 3, and then somebody had the bright idea to say, let's do 1. And so I think 87. Don't quote me on that, but somewhere in the late 80s, somebody had the bright idea to say, "This is silly. Why are we doing 3 different things?" They consolidated, and so
was it after the USFL folded?
It was after the USFL folded, yes. Yeah. And they eventually consolidated and it's like, let's have 1. And it was not a big deal. I mean, literally combine preparation was making sure you knew which flight to get on. And so it wasn't until really the early to mid 90s, you saw guys go to a speed camp for a week or whatever, literally, right? Go to a speed camp for a week and they would, drop a couple pounds, maybe learn the very basics of sprinting technique, and then show up at the combine. But that was still it for a very, very long time. And then finally, we all point to Mike Mamula, right? The man who changed the world, Mike Mamula, who people talk about him as if he were this fraud or whatever, but he was a legitimately good athlete, a legitimately good football player, and he actually had a good couple of years before he got hurt. But once again, I want to switch on combine history. Let's talk about combine present. Since we have, we have Draft Jesus with us. So a lot of people whined about this combine for reasons I'll never understand. I thought it was a great group at almost every position. The quarterbacks are the quarterbacks, but other than that, and I still think more running backs should have been invited, and I'll get into that a little bit more. There were more good running backs available than they invited. And, like, I understand their small school bias, but, like, Chip Trayanum didn't get invited? Like, that was one was like, huh. That was a surprise to me. I know they know about Chip Trayanum, but whatever. So I'm going to start with you, Derek. Give me at least 2 or 3 guys that you feel should have been at the combine who weren't, and then we'll talk about the guys who were there and who you liked.
I don't know that I can name guys who weren't invited, but I'm glad that Jalen Husky was. He's a guy that I saw play in high school, and I remember, it was the pandemic ruined his, I think, junior year maybe.
Right.
He had a ridiculous sophomore year. For Maryland people, they'll probably know. He had 13 interceptions as a sophomore in high school. I actually saw 2 of them one night. And then I felt like he was under recruited. And when the day that list came out of who was invited to the combine, I was scrolling, looking for Husky, because I was like, he better have been invited. I was glad that he finally, got to Maryland, which is where he probably should have been anyway when he graduated from Quince Orchard.
Right.
So as far as who could have been invited that wasn't, I can't really name anybody. I'm just glad that he was. To be honest with you, it seemed like, I don't know that there's a Maryland bias because there's so many Maryland DBs that have been drafted. So that lineage is there for, so many guys. Deontay Banks, the safety that got drafted last year was with Miami, Dante Trader Jr. I actually know the family a little bit. I can't believe I forgot his name for a moment. But I'm just glad that, there is no bias against Maryland guys anymore, University of Maryland guys anymore, those that stay anyway, right?
Mm.
Same question for you, Jordan. Who wasn't there that you wanted to see, and who'd you really like?
So first off, let me start here. I think that this time period is so important, and I think so many people do not. And this is actually for draft heads as well. We don't give the casuals nearly enough credit sometimes. You will see people look at something in a comp or a Senior Bowl or an All-Star game. And a lot of us, like obviously us 3 and a bunch of other people, we started our process literally years ago for some of these guys. But for a lot of these people who are newer to the NFL draft, who are still witnessing it for the first time, this is the first extent of when they actually start their process, and they won't go nearly as insane as us, who will probably go like 200 to 400 deep players, between every person you meet. But what I will say is I was looking at something the other day in terms of analytics, and this is one of the guys I'm going to bring up, is Tyron Montgomery, who was really good at the Senior Bowl, right? And like everybody loved his footwork.
John Carroll, right?
Yes.
It's a good football school. It's a good football school.
It absolutely is. And one of the things that I think people give a little too little credit to is that I remember, because I like to keep track of these things, right? Like these are smaller school guys that don't get nearly as much credit. And I was so curious before the combine that I actually went in and I looked up how many views his highlights had just to see if I could do it as like a joke. Like I wanted to see what would happen.
Which platform?
YouTube. So I was on YouTube.
Okay. I know Huddle tracks it now too. Like you can go like the high school, you can see the views.
Yeah, and like I said, this wasn't like a deep dive analytic by any means. I literally just looked at the views before the Senior Bowl and then after. And then someone like Tyron Montgomery had 128 views to 340. Some of them had 1,000 if you were lucky. And then I watched the first video after the Senior Bowl was published. He had 10,245. Which, what does that tell you? These casuals see a guy they like, and they're like, I'm intrigued. I want to watch more. And that's what the combine should be about, showing people who people don't know who they should keep an eye on. And that's something that people get intrigued by. And like I think like me and Bill have talked about it ad nauseum. Like I still can't believe some of the Indiana kids didn't get invited. Kamara, freaking crazy. Kalen Black, crazy. It's literally in their backyard. Like, what are we doing not inviting them?
Right.
I mean,
they kept whining about the running back class.
Yeah. Yeah, and like that's what I'm saying. Like, and like Ott, I know there's a bunch of stuff off the field and stuff like that too. That's a little bit different, and it may make it a little bit different in terms of some people's viewpoints. But another one I want to throw out there is Jack Strand, who has not gotten any credit quarterback this year, and he's played a long time. Like I don't know if this is off the top of my dome, so like I could be completely wrong in the stats, but he has like over 150 touchdowns in his career, and like there were a lot of guys there who I'll get into when we get into Call My Losers, I'm sure, but that should not have been there as a quarterback standpoint. And those wide receivers probably would have benefited if they had somebody who was a little bit more refined, and that goes for D2 and D3. Like if there's, I know me and Bill have talked about it ad nauseum. If there was ever a year to put more D2 and D3 guys into the NFL Combine, this was one of the times to do it. HBCU schools and all of that. Another guy absolutely drove me insane was Jaden Duggar. Jaden Duggar is a really, really good football player. Why is he not there? Like, why is he not there? I just don't get it, man. But I'll always have a complaint about at least 10 guys already.
Yeah. And he would have tested really well. Like, that's the other thing that you. And so now we're going to get his pro day numbers, which will be really nice, but it's not the same, right? It's not the same. One, not every single team's going to be there.
Yeah.
So they'll have some access to what he did, but it's not the same. He won't be meeting with the same number of teams. I mean, teams will meet with him. He's Jaden Duggar, but there's nothing quite replaces the combine, right? It's just different from everything else.
Level of exposure. Yeah.
Right. The level of exposure, and even just, I mean, Fernando Mendoza's over there, and there's Jerry Rice might walk past you. Like, it's a different experience also, right? Because the combine went from being just a bunch of guys watching athletes get measured, weighed, medical, then even on-field testing, to becoming this bigger event. Probably a little less than 20 years ago, it started to become this whole other thing where guys would show up with their resumes in hand. Like, it's now it's a big deal, right? It's a big deal on multiple levels. It's a open air job market. It's a reunion. It's a bunch of things. But I want to spend a little time on the fact that there was not one single, not a bunch, but not single one HBCU player there. And when I think about a guy like Kelby Gibbons, I mean, people keep saying, film. Throw on the film of Kelby Gibbons and tell me he doesn't deserve to be there, right? And how would he have tested? Frankly, I don't know, but I think he would have tested okay. Now, I'm more intrigued by how he would have weighed, right? My guess is he's somewhere between about 242 and 236, so he's a slightly undersized pass rusher type. I don't know how long his arms are. I don't know any of that stuff, right? Because he went to the combine, right? But I know his tape is awesome, right? And his tape was awesome 3 years ago. His tape was awesome 2 years ago, and it was awesome this past year. He could have come out last year, and maybe he should have. I don't know if it would have made any difference, but he flat out dominated. And he was dominant right out of the box. He dominated immediately. And by the time he's a sophomore, everybody's game planning for him. That didn't stop him. Throw on the tape of Southern versus Jackson, or Southern versus Grambling, or Southern versus anybody, and I don't have to tell you which guy he is, right? You'll find him. If you watch Southern on defense, I promise you'll know which one's Kelby Gibbons. There was, Anton Harris. There's a couple other HBCU guys. I think it was once again this supposedly super weak quarterback class. There's at least one or two HBCU quarterbacks who should have at least received consideration. One, I think, would have actually shown out pretty well. And amongst the running backs, there's Rodney Hammond just jumps out to me from Sacramento State as a guy that I think would have had a very nice day at the office if he'd been invited. Elijah. I mean, I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but
hey, speaking of even the bigger guys there in terms of running back, first off, Landon Robinson, the other one I forgot. He should have had there. But I would have loved to see Terrion Stewart test.
Yes,
that's a bigger school guy. Like
correct.
Because that was his thing. Like, I don't see the testing numbers. That's all I'd want to see.
Yep.
I feel like there should be, like, at this point in time, like satellite, options somewhere regionally.
Well, they did that for a while. And then they stopped. Stopped. Why they got rid of the regional combines, I'll never know. But they got rid of them. They stopped.
I remember a couple of years ago, a buddy of mine coached against Nate Lynn. He went to William and Mary, and then he ended up with the Lions. He actually played really well in preseason. I think this past year or the previous year. Yep. And, it was like, watch the film, you're like, wow, guy, opportunity there. Just certain players who don't get the opportunity, or they maybe they have to attach to some big school's pro day, in their area or in their conference.
And his running
small
partner,
umbrella,
John Pius, right? I mean, that was a nice little pass rush tandem they had at William & Mary between Nate Lynn and John Pius. So yeah, I'm a big fan of both guys. But yeah, I've written fairly extensively about Nate Lynn. I was trying to get him to the Senior Bowl. Shout out to Jim Nagy, who got bugged about that quite a bit. Apologies, I guess, but I stand by. I said what I said, as the kids say. I really think that Nate Lynn should have been there. I'm with you on that. Jaden Knott, right? Once again, a supposedly weak running back class. How was Jaden not there? Cyrus Allen from Cincinnati, I think, would have had a pretty good day at the office if he'd gotten invited. So yeah, it's just some head scratchers about some of the guys that didn't get invitations. I think would have shown out well if they had been invited. And there's also some guys who got invited who I'm like, like guys who weren't even full-time starters, really. It's like, interesting. Now, once again, I get it. Some of those guys, they just want to sort of learn more about, know more about. But once again, this supposedly super weak quarterback class, Ethan Kalamagnias, formerly of Minnesota, now at Rutgers, is the guy that I don't think would have embarrassed himself. Bryce Foster. You mentioned Terrion Stewart, who good pull. I think just running backs, Jamal Haynes. Haynes, anybody?
Yeah.
Like how is he not there? And yeah, I mean, my obsession with small schoolers, I know it can be a bit much, but I've got to mention. I mean, I won't sleep well if I don't mention that one of the most impressive running backs in all of college football, and obviously the best running back in D2, was this absolute killing machine of a running back from Virginia Union that I had a chance to see this year. And then he shows up at the HBCU Legacy Bowl and continues to show out. He's listed at 6'2", 215. Probably not quite that, but he's got stuff, right? So when I look at Curtis Allen, and I say to myself, this is, once again, all this whining is about the supposedly very, very, very weak, supposedly, running back class. What's the excuse? They invited 17 running backs, right? So to put that in perspective, that's the lowest number since 2011, I think. I know it's been a while. And it's the first time in, I think, 13 or 14 years that there have been more tight ends invited than running backs. So they clearly meant it when they said they didn't love the running back class. It wasn't just a rumor. They really didn't, because they didn't invite many. But there were some that weren't there that I think should have been. And the things you get to see someone do, since there's no hitting, right? Obviously, there's no quote unquote real football. You're trying to find out if a guy who's listed at 6'2", 215 is anywhere close to either number, right? That to me is by itself almost justifies bringing a guy like Curtis Allen, bringing some of the other guys who, you don't necessarily have reliable data points on who they are physically. But that's the
questions are still out there for some of those guys, whereas they've been quote answered. Well, if you trust some of the measurements that you get, that you get there, because there's possible issues there too. So
there's fault. That's why I love doing what I call the bacon in the pan test with guys at the Senior Bowl, and see if every once in a while a guy will get bigger, like a little heavier, whatever. Usually they shrink up a little bit between the Senior Bowl and the Combine. I don't know if the person who does like the measurements is more stringent. I don't know. Someday I'm going to have to ask, because some of the arm length guys, changed a little bit, sometimes more than a little bit.
I can talk about that one in a second.
Yeah, please do. In fact, I'm going to
see the differential graphs that are out there. I mean, there's like 12 guys. It's like consistent across the board.
So
right.
I used to be the guy. I'm not going to lie to you. I partially know this is part of the reason it happened. I used to be the guy who dogged time, because I'm like, man, these Senior Bowls and these All-Star games must have no clue what they're doing in measurements, because the Combine's so better. Turns out it was the Combine guys screwing it up for 2 to 3 years, where now you see a bunch of arm lengths that are way smaller, but they're actually more realistic than what the players were actually at. So now a bunch of people are looking at the last 2 to 3 years and being like, well, look at these arm lengths compared to the years before. And I'm like, yeah, but if you compare it to the Senior Bowl versus that, it's like there was only one guy that I remember at the Senior Bowl, and this off the top of my head, I'm sure there was more than one. But the only guy I saw that even got helped this year, when last year it was like 9 to 12 guys who got helped by measurements by a ton at the combine, was Tim Keenan.
Of course, Tim Keenan.
And he did get helped. He did get helped because he was 29 at the Senior Bowl.
Yee!
Yeah, he was. Not 29 exactly. It was like 29 and like 6/8 or something like that. Don't misquote me. It's in the spreadsheet.
But still, that's shocking because I'm 5'7" and 5'8", and I have significantly longer arms than that. So that's a shock. I'm a little over 33, and which is unusually long for someone 5'7" and 5'8", but still, gosh, Tim Keenan. I would not have guessed that my arms are that much longer than Tim Keenan's.
Those out here taking away what Ruben Baines always wanted.
Right. And yeah, I do want to mention thresholds and all of the things exist for a reason. Certain teams have guardrails up about age, arm length, 40 time, vertical, whatever. It's because they've gotten burned before, right? They've been hurt before, right? That's why when a team puts up guardrails, it's because they got too far out over their skis about a player in the past who had some sort of deficiency. And so now when they put up these guardrails, it's to say, hey, I know you like this guy, but the Browns famously, after the Brandon Wheaton debacle, put up age guardrails about guys they're going to take early in the draft. And you can go back and look. After Brandon Wheaton, after they touched that hot stove, if you go in the first 3 rounds, you are at least, at the age, like the quote unquote right age, or you're younger, right? They stayed away in the first 3 rounds from older players. They'll still take a shot on a guy late who's an older player, but they clearly have put up guardrails. Some teams have guardrails about arm length, some about 40 time. Various things there's certain things that no one has guardrails about. And now no one does the 3 cone anymore, it seems. So,
Right.
So if you do have a guardrail about 3 cone,
the ones who do get in trouble for it, everybody's like, "That's the worst 3 cone I've ever seen." Cough, cough. Emmett Johnson. Cough, cough.
Right, but I mean, I'm giving him like stock up because he did it. Yeah. Right. I mean, I
think that's what's disappointing about the guys who aren't invited is that they weren't even given the opportunity to choose, and some of these guys are. Well, I mean, how many guys were even at 50% participation? I saw a stat that there was a significant amount that weren't even participating in 50%. That's
Yep, and that's a big change from the.
You're just showing up there to get measured.
Well, and see, I've been keeping track of it for years, right? And so, like, the biggest thing, like, I always acknowledge this is the fastest draft class we've ever seen. Yeah, sure, but if you took the top 50% of most draft classes, that's probably how it's going to work.
Exactly.
And my thing is, like, it should work like the Senior Bowl. And the Senior Bowl this year, because the few times I've been, like, it didn't work the same way all the time. But that's what I really loved about the Senior Bowl. This guy's like, hey, I'm done after day 2 of practices. Cool. We're going to grab the next guy who wants to come in at your position group. And then we're going to just fly him in. And then he'll be the next guy up. And, like, that's what the combine needs to do. Even if it leads to more work for me on a spreadsheet, I don't care.
Well, my solution was to have day 1 for the guys that are really just there for the meet and greet, right? Just bring them in day 1, let them get weighed and measured, let them, kiss hands and shake babies, and then, sayonara. Here's a bag of, parting gifts, and then bring the guys who are there to actually, work out. And yeah, you could pick a minimum, level of things you have to do to qualify for that. And then that's the guys who were there for the real combine.
The real combine, right.
The real combine. Because we're getting to the point where it's going to start, and shout out to my friend Kent Lee Platt, you're getting these numbers that when you plug them into whatever your algorithm, whatever your thing is, are throwing everything off because you're now having to overweight certain things, right? There's no, when you're using what my friend Jim Coburn, aka Geometrics, if you want a guy who has a deep knowledge of football metrics, Jim Coburn, aka @Geometrics on Twitter, I think he's as good as it gets. And frankly, he should be working for an NFL team. I don't know why he isn't, but whatever. It's another whole discussion. But he's got data on quarterbacks in college going back to 1958, literally. His stuff is incredible. But he calls that a gumbo stat, right? Things like RAS and the Kerwin explosive index and whatever, all these other things, these gumbo stats, right? He calls it a gumbo stat because while it's very attractive, right, and tasty even, you're not able to separate out what you're consuming, right? So a guy could literally just be through the roof on vertical, so on a couple of other things, and then really good on one thing and terrible on everything else, right, and still have a good score because the two things that were so high sort of pull everything up. So you have to be careful. And I love RAS, right? But you have to be careful about how you read it, especially now that guys are reducing the amount of participation. So now if they're just doing the three things they're really good at, or the two things they're really good at, now you're not getting a real read. Like that's like be a real read on someone's quote unquote relative athletic score. It's no longer a relative athletic score because they're just doing a couple of drills. If they just sprint, do the 40 and do the vertical, you're kind of double measuring the same thing, right? You're looking at someone's acceleration twice, basically, because the explosion that allows you to run a good 40 is also going to show up on your vertical. Now, there's some exceptions, like, Dalvin Cook had a good 40 and a very below average vertical. You can be fast without being super explosive. But generally speaking, about, 4 times out of 5, guys with really high explosive testing and things like the broad and the vertical also have really good 40s, above average to really good 40s. So if you just do those three things, right, and you head home, you can end up with this super great RAS, but we don't know if you're agile. We don't know, right? We don't know. Like, there's all these things that are still left unsaid about what you really are as an athlete. Well, and then I want to spend a little bit of time on the on-field drills. Well, now, I'm not going to say I don't care about them because I do. I watch them, I record them, I break them down, I time them. But a guy can look fantastic in on-field drills and still drop the ball like crazy or still be terrible on tape. And then vice versa, right? A guy who's, struggling and to do the gauntlet can be a guy that just lives off highlight reel catches as a player. So I don't overweight these things. But when I see like a truly concerning, and I'm not here to pick on Devin Igbinosun, but I remember watching him in the gauntlet and thinking, wow, has he never practiced this before? Mm-hmm. I don't know if you remember, but he went this way, this way, like a snake, right? And then I think he caught one football cleanly, right? And the rest of them were like fighting it. Like it was like he was trying to get the football away from him. Now, admittedly, he's not going to ever be like an off the charts ball hawk, but he's not that bad in a game, right? Like he's grabby, he's super grabby, but I definitely went back and said, okay, body control ? And I went back and watched some, it did send me back to the tape. And he's not Malik Muhammad, right? Like in terms of like one of those guys who's like super balanced. He's never going to be that. Like he's not that kind of player. But he's not as bad as that. But it's, like he should have done all the athletic testing and been like, oh, I don't think I can do the. Like if you're going to sit something out, like maybe he should have pulled up, with a hammy or something right before they did the gauntlet. Because that gauntlet was, I'm not going to say it's the worst one I've ever seen, but it's in the top 5 or 6 worst I've ever seen.
Who was it Lane from USC that had the really good one?
Oh, yeah.
He was super smooth. You would feel like, with given time to prep, that these guys, to your point, Bill, should be, should not go out there and just absolutely lay an egg. Because you could simulate that, obviously.
Well, it's not, once again, it's not 1984. You don't just get on a plane and pop up there. Like you've seen the combine before, probably, right? Even if you don't have people in your ear telling you what you need to do, you should have been aware of what's going to happen. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jordan.
Oh, so I was going to start on the Ross score for a second. And I love Ken Lee, one of my favorite people. We've been wonderful person.
He's a fantastic guy.
But it always cracks me up too, because and he even says it himself, like, it doesn't fully go into, like, it doesn't necessarily describe who a person is fully as an athlete. It's just a relative score to how it works. But it's like one that I always crack up at looking at is like Tyreek Hill, who's one of the most athletic people you've ever seen in your life, had a 9.39. And that's really, really good, by the way. That's really, really good. And it is elite level athlete. But it would be way higher if you didn't take the measurements into account, which tested very poorly. So, like, there's always context to, like, everything that's going to show on a raw score, and people are going to just overread one side or the other. And it's like some of the most explosive athletes we've ever seen in our lives would get docked for measurements. They'd get docked for, I jumped really bad once. I did a 3-cone really bad. But, like, I have everything else across the board. It's like why we were joking about Sonny Styles. Like, he was the number one linebacker ever tested in the history of time. Then all those agility drills came back and I went, and it's not like it moved him down because he was still a freaking freakish athlete. And I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point. But it's like it moves people down. And then my other side of it, too, is like going off of what you were saying with like the drills and stuff like that. It cracks me up because you saw it in both directions. And it's so funny. I went on Twitter and I would read like all these people's takes who had probably never watched the film. They'd just watched the highlights. And I was seeing like, oh, man, I'm really worried about Denzel Boston's hands. He dropped 3 balls at the combine. Guess what? He dropped 4 balls in his career.
Right.
Like, total. Like, what are we doing? And then I saw the other side. Oh, man, that KC Concepcion, like, that was the greatest gauntlet drill I've ever seen. By the way, really awesome gauntlet drill. Incredible gauntlet drill.
It was.
One of the, like, teach tape of how to run the gauntlet drill.
It really, like that. Right. So kids at home, if you're 16, 17, 18 years old, clip that, right? Record it.
Mm-hmm.
Watch it. Go out in your backyard. Get 6 of your friends. Right, and start working on that today, right?
Yeah.
So that when you are 21, 22, 23, and you're at the combine, you're going to absolutely smoke that thing.
But that's the other side of it, too, is like everybody was like, man, look at how excellent his hands were. And I was like, did you watch the tape, though? Because dropped 10% of the balls and went his way.
and that's the thing I'm pointing out. Like, people always talk about, oh, don't pay so much attention to the 40 or pay attention to sometimes even the on-field drills, which are the things that are football adjacent, at least, can also be completely overblown, right? Mm-hmm. We all remember, watching, a 282-pound tight end. I think he was, whatever he was, something like that. Nearly break a blocking sled, right? Nearly actually break a blocking sled. And while it was like a cool thing, like now it's like a Paul Bunyan legend thing, it didn't make him an actually better football player. Like, let's not, get too excited. It's like when, like, Shaquille O'Neal would break a backboard. Well, I mean, sure, it's Shaquille O'Neal. He's going to break backboards. Yeah. But, like, that doesn't make him a better prospect or a better player. It just means he can do this.
I'm so glad you brought this up because this is something I was explaining the other day to people. And it's like, the 40 does matter to some extent.
Yes.
Right? And I think people dog the 40 too much. But it's like in certain position groups, it's not something I fully look for and care as much. And I still want you to run the 40, right? It's like not saying like you could run a horrible time and I'm fine with it. That's not how it works. But like tight end and specifically, it's so funny because like I'm with Ravens fans all the time. And literally the day after Kenyon Sadiq runs his 40, everyone's like, now I want him at 14 completely. And I'm like, well, we're overreacting day one. That's okay. It happens. We live with it. But like, you're
certainly not surprised, right? Ravens fans,
exactly.
You're not surprised.
Exactly. And I love them to death. They're my favorite people in the world. But I just wanted to put this out there because I had to make this as a point to them. And I was like, I get what y'all are saying. They're really great athletes, right? Let's read the list of the top 10 tight ends in 40 times all time. Mm-hmm. Kenyon Sadiq, Doran Dixon, Vernon Davis, Evan Ingram, Devin Culp, my neighbor, by the way, in high school. Oh, not my neighbor, but he lived down there a couple of roads from me. Albert O, James Hanna, Noah Fant, AC Leonard, Chris Grogg, and Jared Cook. And what did all those guys have in common? A 40 made them rise way too high than they should have.
Yeah, and almost all of them were undersized also, right?
Yeah.
I think Albert O was the closest to being like a full-size tight end of that group you just read off. I think Hannah was in the mid-240s. O was darn near 250. Yeah, Ekwinimam was like 249 or something like that. And the others, I mean, Dorian Dickinson was 228, I think. He wasn't even 230. Well, and he played at 216 when he was in college. He bulked up to get to like 228 because he knew he was too small. And so he bulked up to get into the 220s, right? He played at 216. He was basically smaller than Alshon Jeffrey, right? If you want to get an idea of, like, we're talking about guys who are not as big as Anquan Bolden. He literally was smaller than Anquan Bolden. So Dorian Dickerson is a guy who just wasn't really big enough to be an actual tight end. Hannah was a guy who didn't do much in college. I mean, actually, but I mean, he was a blocker, basically. He was not very big. He wasn't a very big tight end either, but he was basically a fullback almost, right? So that's a guy that if you watched him, you knew what he was in college. He was basically a guy that, wham blocked. I mean, that was like about 60% of his usage in college. He ran some routes, he did some other things, but a lot of wham blocking. Like, he was using the run game and in pass protection, but mostly because of his size. Once again, undersized. He was usually on the move. Vernon Davis was a legit freak of nature, obviously, and a pretty darn good pro football player. Not Hall of Fame, but Hall of Very Good.
Maryland guys almost always test good. It seems like,
you are not wrong about that. You're not wrong about that.
Well, and you know what intrigues me the most about it too is, like, especially at the tight end position, like, we're seeing a shift in a paradigm. It's almost like what we saw. I'd roughly say 10, maybe 15 years ago in terms of how linebackers played.
Yep.
Where it's like you see a lot more freaks of nature who are living in inline receiving routes than you see. It's so funny because I'll watch everybody get dogged for I'll watch some guy be like, oh, he can't inline block. I'm like, well, there's a lot of guys in this class who can. And it's like you look at like them as a whole. It's like this was the first class, and like, and I'm not even saying this as a joke. Like, we literally had 3 guys test about 250 at the combine. That used to be a normal thing. It used to be like everybody was 250, like even 6 to 8 years ago.
Right.
They're going to sub package the guys into. I mean, all the jumbo, 11 or jumbo 12, stuff. I mean, they're going to sub package guys in. I hate to say this, and people that listen to my videos probably don't enjoy it. I'm like, you could sit and predict run pass with a really high degree of accuracy in a lot of NFL until you get late game, but you could predict a lot of it with just by looking at who the tight end is, not how many tight ends are, but who it is.
Right, on the field, right. And, I mean,
like Raridan is your guy, right? I think for this draft, as far as the blocking goes, it's not Jolly. It's not Eli Stowers, it's Raridan.
Kaz Merrick's a decent blocker. Claire's a decent blocker. My guy, my full service tight end, my favorite is John Michael Gillenborg. That's my favorite full service tight end. And while he's not like young Fred Arbanis as a blocker, for those who are super old and know who that is, Stu Voigt, if you're maybe slightly less ancient. But I can stop naming guys from the 60s and 70s. But he's good. The bar has been lowered, so he's actually above average, right? He's an above average blocker for right now. Now, 12 years ago, right? I mean, like Greg Olson, if he were in this draft class, we'd be saying, can a tight end go number 1 overall? Like, when you think about, like, people forget what a ludicrously amazing athlete Greg Olson was.
I think the more though that I've watched film, to be honest with you, I look at a guy like a Josh Cuevas. He's pretty far down the list of tight ends.
Right.
He's a good football player, and he's got some wins as an ex receiver. A lot of these tight ends that are not necessarily Sadiq, but they've got some wins against outside corners.
Correct.
Yes,
and you get kind of far down the list of the tight ends. Cuevas, where is he? In that list, I've been impressed with I don't know if I want to say the ceiling for this tight end group, but the depth of the group, I guess, is the way I would say.
They invited 21 tight ends, and that's above the number that normally get invited. Normally, it's in the mid to upper teens, so they clearly like this tight end group. And I'm going to circle back to the aforementioned one of my guys, John Michael Gillenborg. I had watched him a bunch on tape, and I thought he was a decent athlete, and he tested better than I thought he would. And he clearly understands blocking, like you saw, leg drive technique. He, quick, violent hands. And while he's not, an absolutely devastating blocker, and no one really is amongst the tight end group nowadays, but for where the bar is set now, he's above the average line. He's above whatever the middle line is, right? He's better than most, I guess is the way I would put it. He's better than most. He's better than a lot of the tight ends that are in this class as just a pure blocker. And then you mentioned Justin Jolie. That's another of those guys who is going to probably be played, in various places. He's going to probably line up in the slot outside as a Z, right? And you're going to put whoever your number one receiver, and then have him line up. He didn't test, so we have to sort of speculate. But he looks like a guy who's going to run the 4.5s and probably jumps in the upper 30s, right? I mean, he looks like a really good athlete, moves well, can be used on like trick passes, trick plays, a little bit. I've seen him throw the ball a couple of times at NC State. There's
good after the catch on screens. He's really good on screens.
Very good, right? Has a good feel for even guys he can't really see, like where who's approaching, who's around. Can change direction, or at least on tape, change direction really well. We don't have any short shuttle or three cone, but he looks like a guy who changes direction really well, and has a really good sense of like I said, who's approaching at what angle, who's taking the wrong angle, right? Who can he make wrong with their angle? So yeah, that's a guy I certainly like.
You kind of were on this a little bit when I came in. It was like the 6-minute mark or 8-minute mark or something about the filtering up of play style, and I often refer to it as the NFL is 10 years behind. I always say that. I've been saying that for years, and I think people who watch only the NFL and only college football don't necessarily get a sense of it. But there is this, offensively at least, this trickle up dynamic of what offenses do. A lot of the things that we've seen in the last 5 or 6 years in the NFL, they were commonplace college football 12, 14 years ago.
Correct.
And they were commonplace in high school football
before that
20, 22 years ago. Correct. So I think the tight end conversation to me is somewhat related to that. The play style being more college-esque, or what was traditionally college-esque, is I think kind of interrelated to that tight end issue that you guys are talking about. Maybe that's why so many more were invited, because the NFL has, what's the word, accepted that reality. I don't know if that's a way
embraced even, right? We saw who loves wide receivers more than Sean McVay himself, a pretty good little wide receiver back in the day, right? I've got my notes on Sean McVay as a player, but this, we have Sean McVay, right, at one point, who beat out Calvin Johnson.
I thought he was a quarterback. I thought he was the wing T quarterback. Maybe he played receiver too.
I mean, he probably was a wing T quarterback.
He was athletic. He was.
Right. He probably was a wing T quarterback at some point, but by the time he was being recruited to go to college, he was a wide receiver. And that's the position he played in college. But he beat up Calvin Johnson for the Gatorade Player of the Year. So well done, Sean McVay. But I remember him as a player. But he loves wide receivers. But he was using 12, 13, in a few snaps, even 14 personnel, right? That tells you, right? That tells you how much the world is changing. And of course, you can't play 14 personnel unless you have at least 4 tight ends on your roster, right? I've done the math on this. So there are teams that didn't carry 4 tight ends, like recently, teams that didn't even carry 4 tight ends. People used to kind of snicker at Bill Belichick, who would carry 4, sometimes 5 tight ends. It's like, what do you know those tight ends for, Bill? And now everybody's doing it, right? So, once again, ahead of your time, Bill Belichick. But the teams that are looking at how can we multiple, how can we look like we're going to run the ball and then throw the ball, and vice versa, and all these other things. And so if you have at least one of those tight ends, is what I call a full service tight end, a guy that can give you some of everything. And you've got at least one of the guys who's probably mostly a blocker. And then probably the other 2 are basically, essentially 230 plus pound wide receivers, right? And that's how a lot of tight end rooms are built nowadays.
You just described the Seahawks. You just described the
Yes.
Seahawks. Saul Bear is your blocker. Barner is a little bit of, is a little bit of everything. And then
Right.
Arroyo, the rookie, is obviously just a glorified receiver. I do think that's interesting to the point you bring up about the Rams, because they were strategic. If you look at their drives, I like to drive chart, personnel, down distance, hash, run pass, etc. And a lot of their drives will be like 11, 11, 11, 3rd and 2, 12.
Yep.
11, 12, 11, 3rd and 1, 12. And then goal line. It was really cool, man. The Rams are one that I spent an off season studying after 2023. I kind of would like to do it again with the multiple tight end groups. But this group is good. I liked, like I said, Cuevas is a guy that didn't stand out in testing at all. But he's a good player.
I just said, I expressed my love for John Michael Gillenborg on multiple occasions. To get the best out of Eli Stowers, I feel like you have to not just play him at tight end, right? I think you have to, in my opinion, you have to move him around. He's your wild whatever quarterback. He's a guy that you line up, out wide in the slot, do those little touch pass things, where and then even then he could have a run pass option, right?
Like his production is also like somewhat suppressed at Vanderbilt because of play style and Pavia with the ball in his hand.
Right,
so
exactly. You could just say Diego Pavia. Yeah, you could just say Diego Pavia, but yes.
I mean, I'm familiar with it. My nephew goes to Vanderbilt and plays tight end behind Stowers. And so like the whole testing thing with Stowers doesn't surprise us at all. Like,
no. Well, I mean, he set a 6'8" record in the high jump at Texas.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you didn't know he was a freak athlete before, what have you been watching? And I remember watching him play a little bit of quarterback when he and Pavia were going back and forth for the quarterback position back, playing for Jerry Killen before he had to step away again because of his health at New Mexico State. And I thought, like, in the right kind of offense, Stowers could have been a quarterback. Now it'd have to be like a special kind of, sort of like what they ran at Coastal Carolina, or what a sort of opened version of the flex bone, basically, right? Like where you've got like spread bone or whatever. I feel like he could have been.
That's a good description for what Coastal was. Yeah,
right. He could have been an absolute nightmare to defend because he threw the ball okay, like not great, but there's guys who play quarterback who weren't that much better, right?
But he made himself a lot of money this weekend. I mean, he's
yes, agreed.
Or this week, excuse me.
Yes, well, I mean. But agreed. I mean, and he's a super. I mean, I'll tell you, you have someone who knows him all. But he's super smart and just a super solid person, off the charts character. And if he doesn't make it, it's not because of something within his control. Like if he doesn't pan out, it won't be because of something he could control. I can tell you that much. Well, Jordan, it's time for you to now cast your flowers at the feet of Barry and Brown. I knew at some point this would happen. This is now your moment.
Y'all can hear me right now?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Okay, cool. So first up, I want to say something on the tight end thing for really quick. I wanted to say first off, though, like Stowers so interesting. And like the biggest thing with him is like just a matter of where he goes and how he's used.
Yeah.
And like more than anything, because like I've described to people all the time, but like this is also what Vanderbilt didn't ask him to do. So it's something to keep in mind. Is like he can't block, like he can't, but it's fine because like he can't block a ton of his eyes, but guess what, you can catch among the best of them. And this is something where I think we get and it's funny because I think it goes both directions. I think you have a lot of casual fans who are really into the draft who just start watching 5-minute highlight reels as opposed to watching the all 22, start to get really high on a guy like this and they love him to death. And then as a whole, the all 22 guy start to like kind of bully him too much because it's like, well, now he's a highlight guy and like you don't understand what the rest of the film is. Well, both things can be slightly true to an extent. And that's what I think people don't understand. It's like if he's in the right situation where he's not asked to be an inline blocker, where he's not asked to do that kind of stuff, he's just the second tight end that's sometimes in the slot doing a bunch of interesting things. And like you just take advantage of his skill set. And this is another thing I love to talk about in terms of tight ends in general. Because it always cracks me up how every single year there's a guy like Johnny Davis, for example, who comes out and everyone's like, oh, when you switch him to tight end, it'll be a threat at tight end. I'm like, okay, but do you realize how athletic the tight ends also are in this group? And if you go back and you like actually watch the tight end themselves that plays tight end, they're better at playing tight end.
Right.
And that's something I always stick out to say with it. And it's so interesting to watch as a whole. But yeah.
Her 12 with him was basically like 11. It was a glorified 11. They call it a flex tight end, you know.
Mhm.
But
Well,
again, it goes back to Bill's point from earlier that the NFL begrudgingly, in some ways, adapted. Instead of asking some of those tight ends to go down block or inside release, they just arc release them now. They just arc release them. So now you're just reading someone and you're just tacitly admitting, okay,
Absolutely.
we can't block with this guy, so we're not going to ask him to. Which is, I think, your point.
Well, and the other aspect of it is too is like I've seen it now where it cracks me up. It's like everybody hypes up a call who just came out, Jeff Caldwell, and like the tape is not what the combine was. That is like the definition of the tape is not what the combine is. Those two things are for people, but he still will be drafted higher than even the tape people think he will be.
Right.
Because somebody's going to look at that and say, well, what if there is something there, though?
Somebody's trying to find the next Chimeri DK. Somebody's trying to find – there's always, you know, they're always chasing – that's the thing you have to be careful about, right? When you're chasing – there's a reason your financial advisor doesn't say, hey, take all your money out of your 401k and buy lottery tickets, right? There's a reason they don't tell you to do that. When you're trying to, you know, draw to an inside straight, right? There's things that like it doesn't. It's cool when it happens, and you should enjoy it when it happens, but don't try to make that happen. Don't try to do that. Don't try to find the next Chimeri DK. If you find one, that's so cool. That's awesome. Wow. But you can't make that happen. You can't go around. That is, it's like trying to find the next, you know, Joshua Patrick Allen. Like that's a 3 in 1,000 thing. Like that's it doesn't happen. It doesn't usually work out.
Exceptions to every rule in the world.
Right. But
people love player comps and they love the ability to fit this guy into that box and see if, you know, but to your point about, I think it's Caldwell, right? The receiver that tested real well.
Yep,
when you do go, when someone does, not his film specifically, but I know from a coaching standpoint, like if you do have to go back and look at someone's film and they block their ass off, that's a plus in that guy's category. And, you know, kind of going back to Bill with a receiver, I forget the young man's name, 88 that he's got there now. He went to Texas, and he gives everything he's got as a blocker, first or second year receiver for the Rams.
You're talking about little Jordan Humphrey?
Yeah. No. I forget that could be his last name, but I don't think so. But blocks his ass off. He's a guy that McVay puts on the field because he trusts him to do all the things, you know, he asks him to do. So as far as those receivers go, man, if you test well athletically and you block, which I guess is an interesting cross section, you know, that Venn diagram's probably holding on for some guys, then you really get an opportunity.
I got you, Jordan Whittington. That's who it was. I was trying.
Oh, yeah, Jordan Whittington. Yeah. Who is basically the other. Basically, he's another little Jordan Humphrey, but a little tougher, a little stronger. You're right. Yeah, he's like little Jordan Humphrey with a little more grit, a little more sand in his pants. But yes, right, very similar players. The other thing that stood out to me was the safety class. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, that is the position I played, not well and not often. But it is the position that I was at least on the depth chart at safety. And it's a position I have a certain affinity for. But I think that the safety group has a chance to put several guys into like immediate starter kind of situations.
100%. You mean even third and fourth round guys, right?
Right, exactly. I'm not just talking about the top few guys. I'm not talking about Thieneman and Caleb Downs. I'm talking about 100%. Guys that are going to go. I'm talking about guys that are going to go after Bud Clark. Are going to be immediate contributors.
Smith.
Right, exactly. There's going to be guys in the 5th and later who are immediate contributors, and even a couple might even be starters. This is a really, really good group of players who, and once again, we talked about really athletic. Now, once again, the guys who knew they weren't going to test well didn't test. So So, so everything's skewed. I remember when Najee Harris, just healthy scratched on the 40 period, right? Didn't do it at the combine, didn't do it at his pro day, right? He clearly understood who he was and what he was and was not, and said to himself, I'm not going to put me or you through that. So I couldn't really be that mad at him. He knew he was a plotter. So I get it. But the safety group,
there's so many guys who can move around and play. I mean,
correct. They look
even
good.
Yeah, I mean, I was not super enthused watching a guy like Kilgore play man against certain smaller receivers, like the Clemson receiver. I think Antonio Williams really put it on him in the bowl game for a while. But there's so many other I mean, Kilgore's athletic testing was insane. He's got production. He tackles really well. He's heavy. I think he's like a 215, 220 guy.
Yeah,
and where would he be, similar to Josh Cuevas? Where would Kilgore be in the ranking hierarchy of safeties? I mean, 8, 10, somewhere in that range?
Yeah. Somewhere between 7 and 12, probably for most.
Good group. It's a good group. I agree with you.
And now that we are playing with just 2 linebackers on the field and, sometimes 3, 4, I mean, you've got at least a couple of, sort of cornerback types on the field, maybe 3 of those. But sometimes you're going to have 4 or 5 defensive backs on the field at the same time. Maybe, and sometimes as few as 1 linebacker, and that linebacker might be 221 pounds, right? So that's part of why you're now seeing more and more. Some teams say, "Hey, let's have at least 1 big back. Let's have at least 1 tight end that if he gets rolling, can just sort of run through these dudes, right?" And that's why being able to tackle, you mentioned Kilgore, which is, I mean, let's be honest, we're not living in the golden age of open field tackling. I don't think I'll get any pushback on that. People like to say, "Oh, there's no way that Jim Brown would do what he did nowadays." Oh, really? They tackled every day of camp for months in 1959. They tackled these guys you call plumbers, tackled every day for months in training camp.
Those same people probably thought Derrick Henry was not going to, have an impact in Baltimore. I mean, he's, been amazing the last 2 years. So,
well, at least in part, once again, because guys don't like it. But with putting more and more coverage bodies on the field, when Derrick Henry gets rolling, when a guy like Mike Washington Jr. has got a head of steam, when heck, even a guy like Seth McGowan's got a full head of steam, and a slot guy or whatever is the last thing between him and a big play. Now, some of them will get right in there and cut him down, right? That's what I love about a guy like D'Angelo Ponce, right? That's what I love about a guy like Travis Scott.
Oh man, one of my favorites.
Oh, we're about to love up on some of these nickel hybrid, whatever you want to call them. I think that's what Kilgore is going to end up being, a spur monster. There's all kinds of terms with angel. I've seen about 5 or 6 different terms.
It goes back to your point from earlier. Again, I think maybe it was before Jordan joined in. I remember Maryland, 2010, 2000, somewhere in that range. Kenny Tate was their star. They called him star. Essentially the nickel.
Right.
People call it big nickel. Whatever they want to call it. It's another illustration that the NFL is reflecting with a lag time.